Picture someone sitting down with a Bible for the very first time. Maybe it was a gift, or perhaps they found it tucked away in an old drawer. Or maybe it was left behind by someone they loved. They open it, expecting a simple book, but find a complex table of contents instead. 66 books, starting with Genesis and Exodus, stretching all the way to Revelation. They close it, not because they aren't curious, but because the sheer scope is daunting. It's like walking into a library where all the signs have been removed. But here is the truth. The Bible isn't just a book. It's a library. 66 separate documents, written over 1,500 years by 40 different authors. In 3 languages, across 3 continents, yet they tell a single, unified story. A single story emerges, where the questions raised on page 1 are answered on the final page. The same thread runs from the garden in Genesis to the city in Revelation. Today we're going to walk through all 66 books in order. Not to pass a quiz, but to see what each one is really about. Let's start at the beginning, the Old Testament. The word testament means covenant, a binding agreement with weight behind it. Genesis, the book of beginnings, sets the stage for everything that follows. Genesis means beginning in Greek, but in Hebrew it's Bereshit, meaning in the beginning. It's the beginning of the world, and the beginning of the question the Bible tries to answer. Can God and humanity share the same space? Everything is good until it breaks. One choice, one moment of distrust, and humanity is outside the garden, with a flaming sword behind them. It's not just a story about fruit, it's the diagnosis for everything that follows. Genesis ends with a family, a broken, scheming, deeply human family. Joseph forgives the brothers who sold him into slavery, a picture of grace. Exodus means departure. It begins by naming the descendants of that same family. Now enslaved in Egypt for 400 years, they cry out for help. Moses, raised in the palace of the very empire that enslaved his people, is called by God. The final plague is stopped by the blood of a lamb painted on a doorpost. They arrive at Mount Sinai, where God descends in fire and gives them a law. The law is a gift, a framework for how a people can live as free human beings. Exodus ends with the tabernacle, a portable tent built to God's precise instructions. Most people stop at Leviticus, but that's a tragedy. It's a manual for approaching a holy God. It's named after the tribe of Levi, the priestly tribe, and deals with sacrifices and atonement. The system is held together by one repeating phrase: "Be holy, for I am holy." God isn't demanding perfection, he's describing proximity. The closer you want to be, the more fireproof you need to be. Numbers in Hebrew is Bamidbar, meaning in the wilderness. The wilderness is exactly where this book lives. They have the law, the tabernacle, and the promises, and they still can't trust. 10 of the 12 spies sent into Canaan come back with fear reports. The people choose the 10, and so an 11-day journey becomes 40 years. Numbers is the book of consequences, the natural result of a people who keep choosing slavery over freedom. He gives 3 long speeches to the generation that grew up in the wilderness. The desert teaches us patience. This ancient wisdom inscribed here guides us toward a future of harmony and understanding. He sets before them a choice: life and prosperity, or death and destruction. Choose life. The last chapter of Deuteronomy ends with Moses climbing a mountain, seeing the promised land, and dying. The next section covers the history of Israel in the land: conquest, judges, kings, and eventually, exile. They are a case study in what happens when a nation meant to look different starts trying to become like everyone else. Joshua, Moses' successor, leads Israel across the Jordan. Walls fall, land is divided. The book ends with Joshua's own farewell. As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. A choice is always being made. Judges is the darkest book in the historical section. There is a cycle that repeats 7 times. Israel abandons God, falls into oppression, cries out, and God raises a judge to deliver them. The book ends with a statement that should stop you cold. Everyone did what was right in their own eyes. That is not freedom. That is chaos wearing the mask of freedom. Ruth is a single story set during the time of the judges, a window of light in a dark room. Ruth's declaration of loyalty is one of the most beautiful statements in all of ancient literature. Ruth ends up in the genealogy of King David, and Matthew puts her in the genealogy of Jesus. A foreign widow becomes an ancestor of the Messiah, a short story with eternal consequences. 1 and 2 Samuel cover the birth of the Israelite monarchy. The people demand a king like all the other nations. God grants it, warning them what a king will cost them. He is also an adulterer and an accessory to murder, and God does not throw him away. 1 and 2 Kings trace the monarchy from Solomon's brilliance to the nation's complete collapse. The kingdom splits. The northern tribes spiral into idolatry and fall to Assyria in 722 BC. The southern kingdom holds on longer, but falls to Babylon in 586 BC. The temple is burned. The people are taken in chains. The books of Kings end in exile. 1 and 2 Chronicles cover the same period as Samuel and Kings, but from a different angle. Ezra and Nehemiah are the return. After 7th years, the Persian king Cyrus issues a decree. Ezra leads a group back to rebuild the temple. Nehemiah leads another to rebuild the city walls. Esther is set in the Persian court, the only book in the Bible that never mentions the name of God. A Jewish girl becomes queen of Persia under a hidden identity. A plot to exterminate every Jewish person is uncovered. The middle section of the Old Testament shifts from history to poetry and wisdom. These books deal with what happened, but how to live, how to grieve, and how to think about a world that doesn't always make sense. Job is possibly the oldest book in the Bible, and it asks the hardest question: why do the righteous suffer? Job is described as blameless and upright. He loses everything, and his friends spent 34 chapters trying to explain it. They are wrong, every single one of them. And at the end, God speaks from a whirlwind and doesn't answer the question directly. He answers it with a different question. Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? The book of Job doesn't explain suffering. It refuses to cheapen it with easy answers. Psalms is the hymn book of ancient Israel and the most quoted Old Testament book in the New Testament. The Psalms teach us something and the rest of the Bible sometimes forgets to say out loud. It is acceptable to tell God exactly how you feel. Proverbs is practical wisdom for everyday life, not promises, not prophecy. Observations about how the world generally works, built around one central idea. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Not terror, reverence, the kind of awe that reorganizes your priorities. Ecclesiastes is the strangest book in the Old Testament. A man called the Teacher has tried everything: wealth, pleasure, work, wisdom. His conclusion after all of it is the Hebrew word hevel, vapor, breath, mist. Whoa. If you're looking for ultimate meaning in temporary things, you will always come up short. The book ends with a pivot. Fear God and keep His commandments. Not because life is meaningless, but because meaning comes from somewhere beyond the sun. Song of Solomon is a love poem, passionate, sensory, and at times, startling in its directness. Ah yes, the fifth tenet. It appears the translation here is slightly off. Indeed, the original text uses a different emphasis. Let me correct it. The Church has historically read it on two levels simultaneously, as a celebration of human, romantic. Both readings are valid. Neither cancels the other. The final section of the Old Testament is the prophets. The Hebrew word for prophet, navi, means one who speaks on behalf of another. The prophets are God's messengers. Most of their message is not prediction, it's confrontation. If this is giving you a way of seeing the Bible you've never had before, take a second and share this with someone who needs it. Isaiah is the longest prophetic book, and the one most quoted in the New Testament. Lamentations is 5 poems of grief written after Jerusalem falls. The city is gone, the temple is ash. Ezekiel is a prophet writing to exiles. He sees visions so strange that theologians have argued about them for centuries. Daniel is set entirely in Babylon, a young man taken captive who rises to the highest levels of a pagan empire without losing his identity. The 12 minor prophets are Hosea, Joel, Amos, Obadiah, Jonah, Micah. Amos is a shepherd from Judah, sent to preach in the northern kingdom. His message is economic justice. Jonah is the prophet who ran from his assignment and ended up inside a great fish for 3 days. Micah delivers one of the most concise summaries of God's requirements in the entire Bible. Habakkuk is a prophet who argues with God. Why do you tolerate wrongdoing? Why do the wicked prosper? The God of judgment is singing over his people. Haggai preaches to returned exiles who have rebuilt their own houses but left the temple unfinished. Zechariah is the most messianic of the minor prophets. He sees a coming king who enters Jerusalem on a donkey. Malachi is the last voice in the Old Testament. The final words before 400 years of silence are these. The New Testament opens with a man in the wilderness, wearing camel hair and eating locusts. Matthew writes for a Jewish audience. His gospel is the most structured, most concerned with showing that Jesus fulfills what the prophets promised. Mark is the shortest gospel and the fastest. No genealogy, no birth narrative. Mark opens with Jesus already in motion. Luke is the most literary gospel, written by a physician. He pays particular attention to people on the margins. John is in a category of its own. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Acts is Luke's sequel. It opens with the same disciples, terrified in an upper room. Then the Holy Spirit arrives at Pentecost. The gospel moves from Jerusalem to Judea, to Samaria, to the ends of the earth. The bulk of the New Testament is correspondence, letters written by apostles to specific churches and individuals dealing with specific problems. Romans is the most comprehensive statement of the gospel in Paul's letters. It builds the case from the ground up. 1 Corinthians is a pastoral emergency. Paul writes the greatest passage of love ever composed. 2 Corinthians is Paul at his most personal. He shares a thorn in his flesh, and God's answer, "My grace is sufficient for you." Galatians is Paul's angriest letter. Grace is being supplemented with religious performance, and he will not allow it. Ephesians pulls the camera back to the beginning of time. God had a plan, and you were in it. Philippians is written from prison. The word joy appears 16 times in 4 chapters. Colossians is about one thing, the absolute supremacy of Jesus Christ. By him, all things were created. 1 and 2 Thessalonians address a church confused about the second coming. Paul tells them, the dead in Christ rise first. 1 and 2 Timothy and Titus are letters to young pastors, leading real churches, full of real problems. Philemon is a plea on behalf of a runaway slave named Onesimus. If he owes you anything, put it on my account. Hebrews is written to Jewish Christians, pressured to abandon their faith and return to the temple system. James is the most practical letter in the New Testament. Faith without works is dead. 1 and 2 Peter are written to suffering churches. Peter reminds his readers that God is not slow about his promises. 1, 2, and 3 John come from the disciple Jesus called the Beloved. God is love. Jude is a single chapter, an urgent warning. To him who is able to keep you from stumbling. Revelation is the last book and the most misread. It's an unveiling, not a destruction. The center of Revelation is not the beast, it's a throne, and on the throne, a lamb looking as though it had been slain. The book ends not with destruction, but with creation, a new heaven and a new earth, a river of life, a tree of life. The circle closes. What was so there they are, 66 books, 15 centuries, 3 languages, 3 continents, 40 authors. And the same story, moving through every single one of them. Think of it like a cathedral built by dozens of different architects over 1,000 years. When you step back, everything fits. The proportions are right. The lines lead your eye to the same place every time. If this opens something for you, the most helpful thing you can do is subscribe, leave a comment, and share this. We depend on you to spread the word. Please keep us in your prayers. God bless you. Pay